Hello, people of the internet. Ian Altosaar, the Freedom Astrologer, once again recording another video in the mini lessons in astrology or how to read a birth chart series. It's quite a tongue twister there, but we're already halfway through our houses part of this mini lessons series, and now we're just going to jump in basically and going to take on the next three houses. For those of you who this is the first video that you're watching in this series, please go and look at other videos if you're wanting to know more about how to read a birth chart. I start really from the basics, and now we're on our way to more and more difficult topics. So now we got to the 7th house here, guys, and this means we're halfway there because there are 12 houses in the zodiac or in the natal chart, and each house represents a certain part of our lives, and it's important to know what part it does represent for us to be able to read a birth chart. So the 7th house, very natural house for Libras, very angular house. Again, remember guys, we talked about angular, succeedent and cadent house or houses and the qualities of the houses. And this is, again, an angular one, very much an action oriented house. And this is also important, guys, to mention, that this house is now above the horizon, which usually means that it is a bit of a more public house, if we want to go it. Now, we can differentiate here in the upper side of the birth chart. We can differentiate between maybe more hidden houses, more private houses, and more public houses. And 7th house is one of those that is public all the way, we can say. Angular, action-oriented means more initiative, more action taken in that house whenever some sort of influences fall into that house. Now, let's start with the biggest thing of the 7th house and move our way towards others. It's all about relationships and marriage. And remember, guys, this is also from an elemental perspective, we can say this is an air house as well. So remember, air is a lot to do with communication. And what do we do in relationships? We communicate a lot, we exchange ideas, and this is a lot of what the air is about. Now, it is, we can say that it is not only, romantic relationships or long-term relationships. It's very much to do with the first marriage, but in my experience, I've always observed that it's a lot to do with relationships in general. Now, we have another house that represents friends, and we're going to discuss it in the next video. But having said that, it's still everything that is to do with relationships, basically for me and in my experience, falls under the 7th house as well. So at times, friendship relationships as well. Now, what other types of relationships do we have? We have business partnerships, all about the 7th house as well. Any kind of business deals, business negotiations. This is all not only business related, but all kinds of negotiations, deals that we make in life, contracts that we sign, the partnerships we form. This is all happening in the 7th house. So whenever there's a transit there, good or let's say easy or difficult, that's when you can see development in those areas. 7th house is all about balance. So whatever it is, wherever, whatever is in the 7th house needs a lot of balancing, I would say. And so, for example, if the moon is there, the emotions need a lot of balancing in your life. And you are prone to extremes with these matters as well. It's all about law, justice, legal matters, lawyers, any kinds of contracts that we make that are created. The public is the seventh house as well. The audience, equality, our clients are the seventh house. Allies, also important. And important to mention also promises, the word, because this is all about, agreements. It's a very, I would say, a karmic house as well. Like, do unto others what you want to be done unto you. Because this is where, if you make an agreement or a promise to someone and you break it, there are going to be some actions towards you. And this house is all about, making those promises and keeping to them, being honest and seeing both sides of the perspective, the coin, we can say. Very much how we are in relationships as well. This is an interesting thing I picked up a while back. It's a lot to do with what kind of a partner we attract first and foremost, but it's also very much to do how we are in those relationships as well. This seventh house, it's almost like the partner comes in, they bring in the qualities for us that our seventh house represents, and now we start to let's say live those qualities as well in our lives. So this is quite of an important thing to remember, because remember, guys, the first house, it's a lot about how we present ourselves, how we present the mask we wear, kind of the way we want to be seen. But the seventh house is like, it brings another specter or a side to this as well, what we are going to be like in relationships, and this is important. Because the relationships, it's a huge part of why we are here on planet Earth and what we're here to do, and through what we learn very quickly in life, spiritual growth, material growth, everything comes usually through some sort of form of relationships. Now, it is how we treat others as well. Like I said, how we start to be in relationships. So how we see others. Any kind of one-on-one consultation or relationship is the seventh house. This is quite important. If you have, let's say, for example, a lot of influences in the seventh house, it's quite usual that the person is going to be dealing with one-on-one counseling, one-on-one consultation in some shape or form, some sort of deal making. Let's see if I wanted to say anything else. Commitments, I think I mentioned. Deals, trade, we mentioned. I think I got through the most important parts of the seventh house that I wanted to mention. So, guys, remember, angular air relationships, these are the most important with the seventh house partnerships, and you're pretty much good to go there. At least you can start deciphering some of these symbols here. And now let's go onwards to the next house, which is the eighth house. The eighth house, like you remember maybe from the last video, is a bit of a difficult house. Like I mentioned with the sixth house, it's a natural house for the sign of Scorpio. It's a water house. It's a succeedant house. It's above the horizon, but it's still more of a private house as well. So, and let's dig in deep, because it is a deep house. It is a very deep and hidden house in a way. And what does it represent now? A lot of what it's about is transformation and crisis. These kinds of esoteric psychological topics, taboo topics that are kind of more secret in society. It also represents our partner's resources, obviously. And any kind of like astrology, tarot, tantra, numerology, these kinds of themes, these are all represented by the eighth house, kind of like hidden from our sight, maybe kind of frowned upon, but they have some sort of mysticism about it. And this is also magic, and mysticism is all about the eighth house. Superstition, obviously death, rebirth, birth, all to do with the eighth house. And so one of the things also with the eighth house is this is maybe one of the most practical things you can literally use in your life immediately, is how we go through crisis and how we transform in life. So whatever it is that's in the eighth house, being a planet, being a sign, and go back to the sign videos, you can start to make the first connections, and planets we'll talk about later. And now, big part, how we go through crisis, how we transform, because it's very hard for us as humans to go through life without any kind of difficulty, without any kind of transformation. So it is important to know that eighth house. So whenever it is something happens, you can turn to that eighth house and, okay, so this is what I do, this is where I go to, and this helps me transform my deeper emotional wounds, which is a lot to do with the eighth house, and also get through the crisis and continue onwards to the ninth house, which we will talk about in a second. Intimacy, big part. Other people's money. I mentioned the partner's money, also the client's money. Any kind of money that is coming from other people to you. Also bookkeeping, all these kinds of insurance. These types of avenues are all to do with the eighth house. Any kind of hidden money. It's a weird one. Eighth house is associated still with the stock markets and kind of joint markets, and I have seen that connection. In my mind, fifth house is a little bit more prominent with them, because it's a lot to do with luck and also gambling, and there's an element of that there. But eighth house is wherever some people's resources are kind of pooled in together. So these are places of the stock market as well, or similar like joint platforms where people come in and join resources and invest something. This is a very eighth house topic. Insurance I mentioned, secret groups, rituals. You want to talk about body parts, it's the anus, the uterus, pregnancy, big one, giving birth, I think I mentioned that. Tragedies, bankruptcies, traumas, inheritance, eighth house topic as well. And maybe I think it's good to mention the intimacy part with the eighth house as well. It is because here in the seventh house we come together more like a formal agreement. We decide to live together, we decide to move in together, get married. And in the eighth house, it's a very sexual house as well. So a lot of sexual topics are to do with the eighth house. But now, also, it's intimacy. Whenever you merge with somebody in sex, it is a very intimate activity. So, again, eighth house topic. Psychology, I mentioned. Transformation, I mentioned. Do I have? Let me just check. Shamans. Occult, I think I mentioned all of these. Secret societies, this is one important, like secret groups that are kind of in power and in control of some sort of behind the scenes kind of manner. This is very much an eighth house. Connecting, also I forgot this big one, for kind of connecting to the other realms of existence, but in this case, when we're talking about 12th house, we're going to talk about other dimensions and stuff like that. But in the eighth house, it's more the connection to the dead. The people who have passed on, this is where we kind of connect to them. It's a very like a healing house as well, but at the same time, there's an element of kind of danger and depth and kind of trauma and pain. So it's kind of a mix and match. Yes, you get hurt here, but you also transform here, is basically one of the things here. Extremes. Yeah, extremes is big one with the 8th house as well. Energy healing I wanted to mention with the 8th house. It is because it's, Scorpios. There's an element of surprise here in the 8th house. Things can happen all of a sudden, and they can kind of shock you, and can go to extremes when something transformational happens, in life. And this is one of the reasons why it's so shocking here. Obsession is also 8th house. Whatever it is there in the 8th house, this is a kind of important. This is what we're obsessed as well. Yeah, I think I got, I won't mention there are pretty bad things in the 8th house. Let's do so. Dangers, predators, rape, abuse. These, unfortunately, these, in my experience, again, are very connected to the 6th house people as well, or 6th house topics, but a little bit, especially the rape and the abuse, it's a little bit more to do with the 8th house. Having said that, I have seen these topics very much. It's almost like these two houses to some extent cover each other because they're so difficult houses. So please remember that. And if I can't remember if I mentioned this already, but it's again a succeeding house, so things don't move that quickly there. Water house, more of an intuitive feeling, deep. That's one of the things that are happening there. Very, very intuitive house, and things move slower there, depending on the sign that's in there for you in the birth chart. But usually, from a house perspective, things move a bit slowly and are more hidden. So if there's a lot of influences there in the 8th, for example, the person usually is more private and behind the scenes more so. There it is. And now we're already in the 9th house. So now, remember guys, we just got through the most transformational. So we transform in the 8th house. We go through crisis and get all these big revelations, or prepare ourselves, let's say, for these big revelations. And then we get to the 9th house, which is all about the sign of Sagittarius. It's all about being cadent house. It's all about higher knowledge and higher wisdom. And this is when we go through transformations in life. When we go through transformations in life, when we process those difficult things, usually what happens is our world view, 9th house again, opens up, and kind of the light is shown to us, and we start to see the higher meaning of our suffering, our transformation. And this is where we get to kind of put those pieces together. Remember, cadent house, this is where we kind of change and put the pieces together and improve. We can say it's a mutable house as well, and make things better, and kind of start to understand the bigger picture of things. The 9th house is very much the bigger picture: higher education, higher wisdom, higher knowledge, knowing philosophies, learning, going to the university, seeing professors, mentors, gurus, very much to do with God, religion, knowledge. And one of the biggest things with the 9th house is maybe one of my favorite things about the 9th house. I really recommend you use this. I did a separate video on this channel, so go and check it out for a longer version of this, what I'm about to say. But the 9th house is, whatever it is in the 9th house, gives us meaning and more purpose in life. So if there's a sign there, if there's an influence there, connect those dots and do those activities in real world. Like, even good if you get them ingrained in your career, for example, because we spend so much time on work, it's good if they're ingrained there. So whenever you do this activity, you will start to feel and cultivate more purpose in life, and kind of be more connected to yourself, I would say, even. So metaphysical, sciences we can put under this house: belief systems, traveling, foreign countries, foreigners. It's a very much to do with academical. It's a very academical house, I would say. Universities, I mentioned, like getting higher diplomas is the 9th house. Courses, doing higher courses, wisdom, gathering wisdom there. Sacred places, cultures, the father figure. This is widely, let's say, debated topic in astrology, but I recommend you use 9th house for father, and 10th and 4th house. We're going to, next video, we're going to be talking about the 10th house, and 10th and the 4th as a parental axis. So what I mean by parental axis is when something is there in the 10th or 4th, it can be to do with one of the parents. The more dominant parent in life for the person is the 10th. The more, let's say, nurturing parent in life is the 4th. Theory, traveling, I mentioned academics, teachers, the people who give us knowledge. I think I got through all of that. People who inspire others, and this is kind of like an inspiring house as well. Anything, it's our like connection to God, I would say, is the 9th house as well. Whatever, if obviously I'm not religious, but there's forces around us that we can connect to, and this is the gateway where we can connect to these places. Meaning in life, beliefs, I think very lucky house, actually. This is important to, because remember, it's a Sagittarius house, so it's a very, very lucky house. It's anything to do with bigger picture stuff. 9th house doesn't really like being very much bottled down in those mundane everyday activities. It wants to think big, think bigger vision, bigger picture type of things. So if you have a lot of influences there, you won't like being very much boggled down by everyday activities. So moral systems, this is action, this is important. Virtuous actions, it is to do with law, because it's kind of like justice, I would say, is the 9th house. So it is spiritual laws, ritual ceremonies, churches, libraries, 9th house, grandchildren, 9th house, and guides, hips. Yeah, I think that's about it. That I want, like, the most important things that I wanted to mention about the 9th house. It is a very, very spiritual house as well. So it's not all about the 8th house with spirituality or esoteric topics, and the 9th house is a very, very kind of interested in these matters. It's a teacher kind of house. So if you have a lot of influences in the 9th house, there is a high probability to meant to be a teacher somewhere in some shape or form, in some sort of capacity. So that's it, guys. That's it for this video. So we got through another bunch of 3 houses, only three to go. So we'll finish the houses part of this mini lessons in astrology, and then we will get to putting the pieces together that we have learned, or some of the pieces together, and then we will start to look at planets and aspects and so on and so forth, so you can get the full picture one by one, building the foundation. So thank you very much, guys, for watching, listening. Ian Altosaar, the Freedom Astrologer, out for now, and see you again soon in the next video.